Welcome, humans of the world, and maybe not humans of the world. Welcome, whoever, whatever found this. Cheers. So, my name's Yelly. Some of you might know me from my Instagram, Yellbell Beauty. And why are we here today? Because I hate myself. I'm only slightly kidding. We are here today to total up the value of all of my eyeshadow palettes. Those of you that follow me on Instagram know that I originally wanted to do the value of everything in my makeup collection. That is way bigger of a feat than I thought it would be. And I think eyeshadow palettes as the largest part of my collection are probably a very good place to start. Give me a guess in the comments down below. How many eyeshadow palettes do you think I own? And what do you think the actual retail cost today of these eyeshadow palettes would be? So no matter if I got them on sale, if I got it as PR, if I got it as a gift from my fiance, I am totaling up all of the eyeshadow palettes in my collection at the retail value to see how much all of this eyeshadow is worth. Now, this is purely for science. I'm not saying everybody has to do this, but I do think that it's an interesting concept to look at what does a beauty creator have in comparison to what maybe somebody who is a general makeup consumer has. I am by no means Laura Lee, Manny MUA, any of those big 2016 YouTubers with a whole beauty room, stacked Alex drawers, so many palettes I don't know, but I do have a lot of makeup. I am not going to act like I don't have a lot of makeup, and I am definitely in a place of privilege that I do get a lot of makeup. So without further ado, I think we should get started. So again, I'm just going to be doing my eyeshadow palettes. And my singles are going to be counted. That includes things like Super Shock Shadows, Phytosurgeon's Cream Shadows, anything that goes in a magnetic palette. I even have some palettes that I depotted that go into singles. If I do continue to do this and I do count up my singles, they'll go into that video and it'll be the retail value of the palette. Brand number one, start right off with a controversy, why don't we? Anastasia Beverly Hills. I used to be a super fan of ABH. I collected all her palettes, which you might think is hilarious because I'm holding up two. I decluttered so many ABH palettes last year, including all my Norvina palettes. Maybe it was 2 years ago now. Wow. There are a plethora of reasons that I no longer support ABH as a brand. I'm just not interested in giving any more money to the brand, which is, again, unfortunate because I think they have a really great formula. A lot of the ones that I decluttered were old, past their prime. I wasn't using them as much anymore, and these are the two that were kind of tried and true. As you could see, potentially, they are quite disgusting. They have like this outer velvet packaging. Of course, I kept both the palettes with the velvet packaging, well, two of the three. And there's just no way to clean it. So I apologize that they're that disgusting. Here is the Norvina palette. I do have pan in quite a few shades, so you could see across that I have some pan there. I think I have pan in like half or a little bit more than half of the shades in this palette. I use it quite a bit. This is still like a go-to for me, but you'll never really see me use it on my Instagram because of the controversy. Here is the Soft Glam palette. So again, we got a lot of pans going on in the Soft Glam palette, but not as many as Norvina actually, which is interesting because this is older. When I purchased these palettes, I paid full price for the Norvina palette. I purchased this with my own money. The Soft Glam palette I actually purchased with Ulta points. So in a way, technically, yes, I bought it with my own money, right? Because you need to spend money to get the Ulta points, but no money came out of my actual wallet when I got this palette. Either way, we are now going to add up the retail cost of these two palettes. So I don't know if this was the exact price of them when I bought them. It sounds pretty correct to me based off of my recollection, but as of today, which is June 27th, 2023, both of these palettes are still available for purchase on the ABH website, Ulta, Sephora, etc., and they retail for $45 US each. They have three palettes from Lunar Beauty. Here is the Lunar Beauty Greek Goddess palette. You could see it right here. And this palette I actually got in a Lunar Beauty mystery box. So I did not pay full retail price for this palette. Technically, I probably paid something like $75 for the entire mystery box. And then I got this palette in there with a ton of other makeup. When it was on sale, this has long been discontinued, but it was $48 US. Here is the Strawberry Dream palette. I am fairly confident this is going to explode glitter everywhere because of that diamond shade. This I paid for with my own money. I paid full price, and it is still today $48 US. And then lastly, I have the Life's a Drag facelift. This is my newest Lunar Beauty palette. And I actually got this as a gift from my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, niece, and nephew for the holidays. Full retail price for this is again $48 US. This is a one-off. This is probably one of the newest palettes in my collection, if not the newest. I think I might have one more that's newer, but I actually got this from Hamish in PR. This is the Hamish Nudie Rose Dalism palette. I'm so sorry, I might be saying that wrong. I think it's pronounced Dalism. This one really surprised me. I was gifted this in PR. I did not pay a penny for this, but I looked up how much this was when researching for this video, and this retails for $30 US. I actually find that price quite hefty. While I do like this, $30 is kind of crazy to me. I actually have a code with YesStyle, not with Hamish. Use code YELLBELL10 and you could get 10% off of this palette if you purchase it. And if you use my code, I greatly appreciate it because it is affiliated, but no pressure to. Next, we have Melt Cosmetics. Our first of the Melt Cosmetics is the Muerte palette, the long coveted Muerte palette. So this I actually got as a gift during the more recent restock of it. My fiance got it for me, which ironically he got it for me because I made it through 2 months of a no buy. So he rewarded me for not buying makeup for 2 months by buying me makeup. I love him. Fortunately, I think it is like discontinued again and not coming back, but this palette full retail price when it was sold is $52 US. Then we have the newest Melt palette, the Electrip palette. This is like the mushroom themed one. I got this one recently. I paid for this with my own money from the Melt website, and this as well is $52 US. Now we are going to move on to my last surviving Huda palette. I actually used to have like all of the little mini Obsessions palettes. It's crazy. I actually decluttered all of them recently, and this is my last remaining Huda palette, the New Nude. I have had this palette since I was like, I think a junior in college. That was like 6 years ago, I think. So this is like a pretty old palette. I think this might be like the second oldest palette in my collection with the exception of Soft Glam. It still works very, very well. I haven't noticed any change in formulation. The shimmers are still creamy, etc., etc. I actually got this palette as a holiday gift from my mom that year, so I did not pay for this, but as of today, this palette retails for $65 US. So I have two Glamlite palettes. They're actually both from the same collection. We have the Chocolate Martini and the Dirty Martini. So here is the Chocolate Martini. It is mostly those like nude colors, like warm nudes, but it has like a pop of purple. This white's actually like a gold duochrome, so really nice. And then we have the Dirty Martini, which is entirely greens. So love that. And each of these palettes today on the Glamlite website are $35 US. Next in this drawer, we have Blend Bunny. Everybody's going crazy about Blend Bunny still. I think 2022 was like the year of Blend Bunny. This is my only Blend Bunny palette. It is the Surge palette. I think this is the palette that like really took off for them. Like this is a beautiful palette. I use this so much actually just for the mattes. The shimmers I could really take or leave in here. Like it looks like there's big dips in them, but they actually have like that putty formula, kind of like a Super Shock shadow. So I probably only like swatched them and maybe used some of them once or twice, and it looks like there's a fairly big indent because of that. But I could tell you for certain that I don't think I've ever used this pink or this purple in an eye look. I purchased this with my own money. I actually got this, I think, during like a Black Friday sale or something like that, so I did get it on a discount. But full retail price today, the Surge palette is $43 US. All right, last but not least in this drawer, we have Kaleidos. I have 4 Kaleidos palettes. So our first one here is the long discontinued Club Nebula palette in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. I was like obsessed with this palette when it first came out. I think there was like a whole month where I only wore this palette. Like I was like obsessed with this shade, this shade, this shade, this like perfect taupe cool brown. I was just like so in love with this. I did pay full price for this and I purchased this myself. So this did take a bit of digging because again, it is long discontinued, but I was going on different websites like Temptalia, things like that. And it seems that this retailed at the time of its discontinuation for $45 US, which is funny because it's actually shocking to me how, this is going to sound weird, but how cheap that sounds in comparison to what I probably paid for this, because Kaleidos has crazy shipping charges because it's an international brand. I think that is why I perceived that this was like a $65 palette. I think I just paid like $20 in shipping. But when I found that, I was like, wow, that can't be right. But I believe it is. Multiple sources have listed this as $45 US, which is even crazier when you see that people are selling these used for hundreds of bucks on Mercari. So that's pretty nutso to me. Okay, next up we actually have 2 Futurism palettes. I have the Electro Turquoise and I have the Sashimi City. You're gonna have to forgive what these look like right now. I'm using some of the shadows in these for a BYOP. So right here, I think this is supposed to be like a shimmery turquoise duochrome. And then up here, this is supposed to be a dark brown. And then in the Sashimi City, we're missing the 3 middle shades. But so there is like a gold to green duochrome, a pink to like bronze duochrome, and then like a mustardy kind of brown right here. At the time I am filming this on June 27th, 2023, Kaleidos has announced that they are discontinuing the Futurism palettes. So these are actually on sale right now on their website for $19.24, which is a very interesting price to me. Full price retail, these are listed as $24 US. So that's like what, like $5 off. But I do find that very interesting that it's like 24 cents. And lastly, from Kaleidos, we have Flower Punk. I'm sorry, but my ring light and all the lights, if you couldn't tell with all the shadows that I have and probably the noise, it is pouring outside right now and it's very dark in my apartment because of that. I have like all these yellow lights everywhere, essentially. My ring light is the only thing bright enough. Anyway, the ring light's bouncing off of it because the package is a mirror, but I still can't get behind this packaging. Like this whole like completely comes off packaging. It's just not for me, but here is the Flower Punk palette from Kaleidos. I bought this on launch day with my own money, and this retails currently for $36 US. Again, I think that my idea of price at Kaleidos is very skewed because of the shipping, because I also thought this was like $52 for some reason. And that concludes drawer 1. Okay. Drawer number 2 is going to be a huge ding, and you will see why in a moment. Here are my Natasha Denona palettes. Okay, so I could actually preface this by saying this is the Sunrise palette. 2 things for this. 1, when I bought the Sunrise palette, Natasha Denona MIDI palettes were $65 US. They now retail for $69 US. So if I bought this today, I would spend $4 more. But in addition to that, I did buy this on Black Friday. Here is the Love palette. So the Love palette is very similar. When I bought it, it was $65. Now it's $69, and I got it at that same Black Friday sale. This one is very interesting to me. So here is the pastel palette. This is one of my newest Natasha Denona palettes. It's very beautiful. But this MIDI palette on the Natasha Denona website right now still retails for $65 US. I'm actually not sure why that is. It must be like a cost of pigments or something, or maybe because this is limited edition, they like didn't raise the price on this one. I can't come up with a reason. These are both listed, for example, as having 19.25 ounces in them, so it's not like a weight thing. I can't really explain it. I'm not sure why. This one has like a soft touch package. It's not like shiny like the others, and the purple dyes in here when I use my finger in the shadows and then I touch the palette, it has stained the front. I like have scrubbed and they don't come off. I don't know why. So here is the My Dream palette. This was actually the first palette that I got after she raised the price to $69. I bought this at Sephora, full retail. I told myself I wasn't gonna get it, and I went to Sephora with a friend and I saw it and I was like, I must have it. Okay, now we got our heavy hitters. Circo Loco, probably my favorite Natasha Denona palette. Actually, it might be tied for the pastel now. I know so many people think that this is ugly, but I just love this palette. I mean, those of you who follow me on Instagram know how much I love this palette. A lot of my Natasha Denona palettes I take apart, I put in BYOPs, I use them as singles. I use this palette on its own. I use this palette so much. I can't explain what it is. This chaotic, crazy color story speaks to me. I know anyone who just found me is like, what, you're wearing brown eyeshadow right now? I just had work, so I don't wear this kind of stuff to work, but if you follow me on Instagram, you've probably never seen me wear brown eyeshadow. But I love this palette. I also got this on that Black Friday sale, so I got it 40% off, but full retail price, this is $129 US. Last but not least, the gold palette. This is gonna look real funny right now, I'm just warning you. I took out both of the teals for a BYOP right now. This just looks like a brown mustard palette right now. It's really funny. It looks kind of like a whole other color story. I bought this full retail price myself, $129 US, no discount. So in theory, this is the palette that I spent the most money on in my collection. So yeah, that is the gold palette. This is actually, I believe as I'm filming this, I think this is back in stock right now. So if you really wanted it, now is your chance. I'm not trying to bet people to spend lots of money, but if you've been lusting after the gold palette and you can't get it, it isn't back in stock now. These are just so heavy. Doubled up at once. I don't even know how we got here, okay? At the beginning of last year, I didn't have any Pat McGrath palettes. Now I have 4. I can't really explain how we got here. I'm sorry. So our first friend right here, this is the newest Mothership palette at this time, I believe. This is the Moonlit Seduction. This is actually the first Pat McGrath palette I ever bought. I bought it actually off of someone on Mercari in conjunction with the Utopian Dream, which I'd been lusting after for a really long time. And I figured there is no way that this is real though, right? Because I paid $200 for both palettes and these retail full price for $128 US. I was like, there's no way. So when I got them, I took the serial number from the boxes, I sent it to Pat McGrath, and these are real. So I don't really know if that person just took a huge loss on these completely new Pat McGrath palettes, or they stole them or something. I have no idea. Pat McGrath did not tell me that was anything suspicious. I just asked them is this real? And they were like, yeah, that's a real serial number. But they weren't oh my God, that was stolen off the back of a truck. So there you go. That's how I got this one. Very heavily discounted, but this retails for $128 US. So $1 less than the most expensive Natasha Denona palette. This is the Divine Rose 2. This is one of the 2 most recent Pat McGrath palettes that I have. I got a Pat McGrath gift card from my brother for my birthday. So technically I did not pay a dime for this, but the retail value is $128 US. Pat McGrath. Oh my God, I had 5 sips of beer. What's wrong with me? Okay, Pat McGrath palette number 3. Okay, this one is the Subversive palette. This is the other newest one that I got. I also got it with the gift card my brother got me. It was a $200-something gift card. So in theory, I paid for a little bit of each of the palettes, or I paid for a little bit of this one, but I think I paid $40 when I checked out. So for the 2 Pat McGrath palettes, but this is $128 US. And last but certainly not least, our friend that started it all, Here is the Utopian Dream palette. This palette, like all of her sisters, retails for $128 US. Oh, you thought we were done with this drawer? We are not. I also keep Odin's Eye in this drawer. So those of you who are longtime followers know I used to have like all the Odin's Eye palettes. Like I was a big Odin's Eye collector. I have recently decluttered many Odin's Eye palettes. And if you're gonna ask me why, it is literally just because I was not using them. I had so much space in my makeup collection, so some I gave to friends, some I sold on Mercari. Yeah. We'll start off with our legendary Diversa trio. So this is actually quite funny. I, at the time of purchasing these, missed out on Annette's palette. It was not in stock, it sold out first, so I got Judy's and Tina's palettes. Then I was told I won an Instagram giveaway that I had entered even before buying these on Annette's Instagram, and I got the whole bundle. I had already been delivered these at that point. So what I did was I kept Annette's and added it to my collection, and then I took the other two and I gave them to friends. So in theory, this was free. These two I paid full retail price for. These are long since discontinued, but here is Annette's palette. Again, I won this in a giveaway. The full retail value at the time of discontinuation was $34.90. So that's like a little strange for a number for me, but a lot of the Odin's Eye palettes are actually like that. So I do think it has to do with an international conversion. Here we have Tina's Hummingbird palette. I purchased this one myself. And the full retail price for this at the time of discontinuation was $34.90. Last but not least, we have Judy's Red Dragon. I love Judy. She is like top 5 favorite YouTuber of all time. Like she's just so positive and great. And this, like her friends, is $34.90. Then we have what I think is the cheapest Odin's Eye palette that I still have, because I no longer have the small little mini ones, like the thin long rectangle ones. If you have seen them, you definitely know what I'm talking about. But this is the cheapest one I still have. This is the Cat with Golden Carriage from the Saga of Freya. It actually kind of reminds me of like a muted version of the Kaleidos Erec. I almost just said such an inappropriate word. Wow. This reminds me of a muted version of the Kaleidos Electro Turquoise palette. And this palette retails for $28.90. Again, like a strange number. I do think I got this like on a Black Friday sale, but full price, $28.90. This one is my newest Odin's Eye palette. I actually haven't gotten any of their recent releases since I did my big declutter, but here is the Solmon 2. I love this palette. I use it so much. It's like a little muted rainbow. This palette is the only rounded number of all the Odin's Eye palettes that I have. This palette retails for $39 US. Lastly, we have our Norns palette. This is still, to this day, my favorite Odin's Eye palette. The shimmers in here are just top notch, especially this bottom row. I do think I got this on Black Friday as well, but full retail price, we're back to the interesting pricing. This is $35.90. Drawer number 3 is an interesting like mishmash of things, but all of my like one-off palettes in this drawer I'm gonna start with. So all of these, I only have one palette from that company, and they are here. So this is actually, I was right, that was not the Hamish palette was not the newest palette in my collection. This is the newest palette in my collection. It is the Unleashia Peach Aid palette. I did not pay full price for this because YesStyle gives me like a code to purchase things at a discounted price because I am an affiliate. So I got this like 15% off. But we are back at the interesting pricings. This must be again a conversion, but this retails for $19.30. We have our only friend right now from Flower Nose. So this is one of the Strawberry Rococo palettes. This is the only Flower Nose palette I have, and I did get this on a discount. They were having some sort of sale that if you got a mirror, you got like money off a palette, and I had been lusting after this hand mirror. So I got this palette to review for an Indie Makeup Monday. Full price, this retails for $35 US. This is my only Game Beauty palette. It is the Game Beauty Victory palette. I purchased this full price with my own money for an Indie Makeup Monday. I think this might have been like one of my first like brand review Indie Makeup Mondays that I did, because in the past I used to just do like indie favorites, and then I started doing like here and there like indie reviews from new brands. So I think this was like one of my first like, let me try something just for Indie Makeup Monday review. I did buy this with my own money. It's funny because looking at this right now on the viewfinder, I'm like, that right there is the Natasha Denona Gold palette. And then like that right there is like a quad of the Natasha Denona Bronze palette. That's very funny to me. I actually love this palette for travel. It's like a great little neutral palette with like a pop of blue and teal. The shimmers are nice. This is like a little duochrome. This is a little duochrome. This is just a gold. It has like that interesting like flecking in there that Game Beauty does in some of them, but it's just gold. This palette, as of today, retails for $45 US. Right now we have our only palette from Glaminatrix. This is the Sandra Rose Mini palette. I love this palette. It's so cute. It's such a unique color story. The formula is great. There's multi-chromes in here. There's duochromes in here. There's regular shimmers in here. Their mattes are nice. This palette, I was also surprised at how cheap it was, but again, I think it's because of the shipping from Australia. Palette retails for $40 US. Again, I somehow thought this was like 60 something dollars, so I think that it is just the shipping that is like in my mind factoring into these palettes. It's like all the palettes that ship from far, far away I think are much more expensive. It's probably the shipping. This is the Adept House of Elle palette. This is discontinued. This is my only Adept palette. I knew that there was something about Adept that had happened, but I wasn't entirely sure what it was. I purchased this palette because I thought it was beautiful, and then I mentioned it to a friend. A friend had mentioned that there were maybe some controversies around Adept. So those of you who follow me on Instagram know that I had kind of asked like, what happened? Like, can somebody tell me from your opinion what happened? Can anyone point me to like the Adept page where they maybe addressed it, or like a Reddit thread, or the page of the creator who was involved? So since then, I have not bought anything from Adept. So this is my only Adept palette because of that, because I'm like in this weird limbo of like, I don't know if they addressed it correctly. I really can't find any proof that they did. So I haven't purchased anything else from Adept, but as far as this goes on like impressions, this is a great palette. So the Adept House of Elle palette at the time of its discontinuation retailed for $49 US, which is actually quite a hefty price for a 9-pan. Okay, I have two palettes from Give Me Glow. These each retail for US, which sounds crazy, but they have so much product in them, I'm never gonna hit pan. So this is the Pastel Dream palette. I actually used this so much this like past spring and last summer. Like I used this so much. I don't even know like why I bought that Flower Nose palette, because like this is the pastel palette to end all pastel palettes. I'm a little scared to open this, but this is the Bad Witch palette. I'm scared to open it because, okay, we are in good shape. This purple like exploded and I can't explain why. I've had this palette for like over a calendar year. And I opened my drawer the other day to use it after not using it for a really long time, and this was just like completely crumbled and exploded, this shade right here. But again, this is $52 US. Those of you who are longtime followers know that I actually duped out this palette when I first came out to not buy it, and then I caved and bought it anyway. And I was not disappointed. This is a really nice palette. I actually forgot to in my little pile of one-offs. They were buried, so let's talk about them. So here I have the Ace Beauté Classical Paradise palette. This is currently my only Ace Beauté palette, and I got this on the BoxyCharm drop shop for like $5 because this is the old formula. I was like this close to decluttering this past like winter, I think, but I kept it around purely for like the orange, the yellow, like these reds. The mattes in here I think are really nice, which is funny because I think when people complain about the old Ace Beauté formula, their arguments are that the mattes aren't good and the shimmers are fine. I think the mattes in here are great, and the shimmers, I'm sorry, I don't know what the new formula is like, and this is nothing against Ace Beauté because I like love their lipsticks, I love the color stories they make, but the shimmers in here are abysmal. So even though I did not pay full price for this, this is $34.99. It's another interesting price. I believe this is my last one off in the drawer. I might be wrong, but this is the Clarity Cosmetics Bloom palette. I did purchase this for an Indie Makeup Monday review. I do really like this palette, specifically like these two shimmers. They are just like that chunky, sparkly goodness that I love. Okay, we have Shrouds. We got a few here. These are gonna look kind of funny, but we have the Divinity palette. This one's gonna look the most ridiculous. So this palette actually is not magnetic, but what I did was I depotted all the shades, put magnets down in the pan wells, and then I was able to, you know, put them back. The shades themselves are in like magnetized metal or like magnetizable metal so that they do stick to magnets, but like this palette, they were glued in. I never understand that. Like when brands like shell out money for the pans that are actually magnetic and then they glue them right into a palette. Like it's bizarre to me, but I don't know. This is actually on sale right now on the Shroud website for like something crazy cheap. I think like $10 or $15. And the full price of this palette is normally $35 US. If I had to venture to guess why it is on mega sale, it still says Strobe Cosmetics instead of Shroud Cosmetics on the packaging. So that's their old name. So they probably still have stock of these with the old name on them that they're just trying to push through before they potentially restock the palette with the new name or discontinue it. I'm not sure. Here is the Creepy Cute 2. This is another one. It's going to have some missing ones. Alien Queen is currently in a BYOP. It is like a teal. And then Get Lost is currently in a BYOP. And it's like what I'd call like a sour apple green color. I use it all the time for BYOPs and it retails for $35 US. This is the most expensive Shroud palette and the newest that I have. Right now Moon Moss is taken out for a BYOP right here. It's like a mildew green, if I had to explain it, like a dark mildew green. And this is $45 US. And then old school, this palette is so old that it says Butte Bean on it instead of Batty Bean. So this is Betty Jean's palette, and this retails for $35 US. This palette is like so used. I have like a huge dip. Every time I use Spooky, I'm like waiting to hit pan in it. Trappa is another one. I use them both so much. You've probably seen them in so many of my BYOPs. So I just know that someday soon I'm going to hit pan in this palette. This one is so upsetting, but Aether Beauty. I have 3 Aether Beauty palettes. I believe all 3 of these are still available for purchase, but the brand is going out of business. You could get these all on mega sale right now. So if you want to go grab them, now is your time to grab them. Right here I have the Manifest palette. I did get this on sale. I did not pay anywhere near full price for this, and full price it retailed for $58 US. I highly doubt anyone at this point will be paying full price for this if they get it. This palette is actually the first Aether Beauty palette that I got. I got this on BoxyCharm Drop Shop. This is the Moonlight Crystal palette. And what is interesting about this is I remember thinking at the time that this palette was wildly expensive, like $70 or something like that. And that's why I like refused to buy it. And then when I saw it on Drop Shop, I was like so excited and I bought it and it was like $11. But now going on the Aether Beauty website, the full retail price is nowhere near what I thought it was. The full retail price for this is $58 US, much like the Manifest palette. I don't know why I like have such a vivid memory of that. If I could find any proof that I'm correct, I'll like put something up on the screen. I might be completely like fever dreaming, but I remember this being like wildly expensive at the time. Last but not least, we have the Rose Quartz palette. So not the quad, the whole palette. I actually used to have ColourPop That's Taupe, and I decluttered it because this is just the better version of it. I love this palette. I use this palette for work a lot. It kind of looks like I'm wearing it right now. I'm actually wearing Phytosurgeon shadows right now, but this is like pretty close to like a look that you can get with it. This is $48 US, so $10 less than its siblings. Let's kick off drawer number 4 with my remaining ColourPop palettes. Can you believe these are like, I have 4 ColourPop palettes? That's like insane to me. No, I have 5. Where's the 5th one? My 5 ColourPop palettes. That is insane to me that I like only have this many because I used to have so many more ColourPop palettes, but they have, you know, long been decluttered. ColourPop collaborated with J.K. Rowling. I don't think I need to say anything else. I haven't bought anything from ColourPop since that happened. It's actually been quite a while since I bought anything from ColourPop since before that happened. But since that, I will no longer support ColourPop. This one is interesting. So this is the Aura and Out palette, but you'll notice if you know what that looks like, this is not the Aura and Out palette. This specifically is a mashup of the Aura and Out palette and I believe it's called the In a Trance palette. It's like the purple one, also from this tie-dye collection. And when I went to go declutter those, I took out the shades I liked from each palette and then I just plopped them into one of them. I'm just going to total this as if this was, you know, one of those palettes. So what is interesting to me is I definitely bought these because I remember at the time thinking like ColourPop's 9 pans were $9. This is still available on the ColourPop website. Like these tie-dye 9 pans are still available on the ColourPop website and they currently retail for $14 US. This one is probably going to explode, but here is the Child palette from The Mandalorian. Very cute, lots of greens. Yep, I'm already covered in the glitter. So when I got this palette in the mail, it was completely exploded. I told ColourPop, they said they'd send me another one, and by the time that, like, it took like a whole month to send me another one, I'd already like mediocrely repressed this one, so I gave the other one to a friend. This gold shade in particular, like, just never wants to stay in the pan. Anyway. Aside from my glitter problems and my poor repressing, you'll also notice that this shade right here, Droid Protocol, if you have this palette, it's probably like a dark brown. I actually took all of my ColourPop shades out of their palettes for a while and was using them for BYOPs, and they were stored amongst my singles. And I got rid of anything that I thought was like a direct dupe for something in my collection, or I found that like if I had a dupe for it, like I was gonna reach for that dupe much more than it and I was never going to touch that one. So that brown came out because I have so many brown Sydney Gray shadows that are just way better than a ColourPop formula. So this is actually a shade from the Aura and Out palette that didn't happen to fit in there. I kept 10 shades from the 2 palettes. It's a 9 pan, so I was able to just pop that one in here because I kept 8 shades from this palette. This palette right now is still available and it retails for $16 US. I am not shocked that this is discontinued, but the more I think about it, I am more shocked that this one is not, because ColourPop just discontinues things at like an extreme rate. Obviously the collabs are like the Star Wars one is probably going to stay for a licensing thing, but like to know that this was discontinued and they kept the tie-dye collection around is pretty weird to me. But this is the Cherry Crush palette. It is missing a shade right now because of a BYOP, but it is missing Take a Bite, which is like a really, really dark, like purpley red. This palette is no longer available on ColourPop, like I said. I actually had to go on Temptalia to find out how much this palette was. Like I couldn't find it anywhere else. So based on Temptalia's post at the time of discontinuation of this palette, this was $18 US, which is like crazy for a ColourPop palette, right? $18 for a 9 pan from ColourPop? Like, who do they think we are? But regardless, I must have bought this like on some sort of sale at ColourPop, because ColourPop for one is always having a sale. Never buy, if you're gonna buy from ColourPop, never buy anything from ColourPop full price, okay? Like that's just like step number 1. Don't pay them $18 for this. Here is the Of Quartz. This is the newest ColourPop palette that I have, but I did not buy this. It is also missing 2 shades, but my friend Olivia, Strawberry Mermaid Beauty, follow her on Instagram, subscribe to her YouTube channel, but she actually gave this to me after she was not using it. She sent me a few palettes. This is actually a surprisingly good palette. The one thing that really is like weird to me about these is, here's a good example. This is a 9 pan. This is a 9 pan. Do you see the size difference in the pans? These pans are smaller but thicker. These are like wide, thin ones. This palette is still available and it retails for $14 US. So again, that's like crazy to me because this, I believe, has more product than this, and this was $18 and this was $14. Is that right? Where is like the price per volume here? Okay, this has 9 grams, and this has 9 grams. They are the same. These are the same. These are the same, they're just shaped differently. And this was $4 more, and this is way superior quality. And lastly, like the biggest disappointment in collaboration history, I think you could maybe see it if I do that. Yeah, the Sailor Moon palette. Why did I keep this even though it is awful? Because I love Sailor Moon. I hate this palette. Like so much. The quality in here is awful. The shimmers in here are crumbly and they explode everywhere. Every single matte in here has glitter in it and they are powdery. They actually touted this as a pastel palette, which I don't get because if you look at these, they're like neon, so I'm confused. I also don't know where in the world they thought that this was like a color story of Sailor Moon. Like, they don't even make sense. This shade right here is called Silver Crystal, and I don't know if you could see that in the camera, but it's pink. It's called Silver Crystal, and it's pink. Like, they didn't even try. They were like, let's just like throw a bunch of the colors that were duds in the factory and put Sailor Moon's name on it, and we'll be able to sell it. And that's probably exactly what happened. Anyway, rant aside, this palette, I know for a fact, changed price. I only know that because it had sold out on the ColourPop website and I went to Ulta and got it there. And as I was getting it, the girl at the checkout was like, oh yeah, and they're raising the price of all the ColourPop palettes. You're lucky you got this. And then now, this is $22 US. Now, in comparison, the 9 pans have 9 grams. This has, what, 14.2 grams in it. But this is 14.2 grams of crap in a really cute package. Okay? That's like, it is what it is. This is like ColourPop, people always say, and it is 100% true. They have the good formula, they have the meh formula, they have the awful formula. Like, there's like a drop off. You're like, good, meh. What the hell just happened? What the hell just happened? This one is going to be like a heavy hitter. So as of right now, this is my only Ensley Rain Cosmetics palette. This is the Strawberry Moon palette. I do have Katie Shifty Shadows collab on the way. Yes, this is private labeled. There is nothing wrong with private labeling. Every time somebody on the Beauty Guru chat or Reddit like talks about private labeling, I'm like, you're all wrong, okay? Like, they probably all hate me. I'm like that person that comes in and corrects all of them, okay? It's not drop shipping. It's not like, you know, what you think it is. And then it's everything. Like, they're like, oh, it was made in a factory in another country. It's private labeled. That's not what private labeling is, okay? Okay. Anyway, I can make a whole other video about private labeling, what that is versus factory versus drop shipping. This is private labeled. And then I believe it has 2 hand-pressed shadows in it. That is perfectly fine for me, but you probably notice a lot of these, like this teal shade in particular, like this blue shade, this orange, like you've probably seen in a lot of private labeled palettes. If you have like a huge collection of like Sugar Drizzle palettes or It's Belle palettes, you probably have these shades like many times over. So I don't know if I would recommend this to you, but for me to just have like all those like common private labeled shades in one spot, like this is really, really great actually, because it has a lot of those, like most of these are duochromes, triochromes, multichromes. This bottom row right here, the mattes, they're fine. That's not really where this palette shines. There's a glitter, never use it. I do think this is discontinued, but at the price that it was at discontinuation, it was $85 US. It is quite a pricey palette, but it has a lot of everything. This is like perfect for travel for me, so I was perfectly fine with that price, but some people would find that like a ridiculous price, especially for a palette that was private label. For me, this is just like a nifty way to kind of, you know, travel without, I don't know, my Clionadh multichromes that I would like be devastated if they broke, you know? The brand to end all brands of 2022, Fantasy Cosmetica. I love Fantasy Cosmetica. I love Jordan, the owner. They're great. This is the one Fantasy Cosmetica palette that I have. This is the Bard palette. It's actually funny because like I would say that this is the one that spoke to me the most, but if you know what speaks to me, you'd probably think like the Rogue palette would speak to me, but this is just like the perfect fall color story to me. So here's a perfect example, right? Fantasy Cosmetica is private labeled. Jordan did not press any of these shades themselves. They bought these shades and then they curated a color story. That is what I'm paying for when I'm paying for this, that upcharge when they're like, oh my God, I could get it on AliExpress for $1. Why would they blah, 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 blah. Because Jordan thought of a color story I would have never thought of. For me, this is like the perfect example of like the most amazing way to private label. This palette retails for $38.99. Here is my only Pink Crush palette. It is the Lucid Dreams palette. This is also private labeled, but it is right up my alley. Look at these shades. This is great. I mean, there are shades in here that I could take or leave, like Utopia and Dreamscape, or just like satins, and it's like meh, I don't really use them, but Like the duochromes in here are not really overlap from anything. Like I don't really recognize like this one in particular and this one. Like I don't recognize these in other palettes. This one I think I have in one or two other. It's just a really nicely curated color story. This is like, again, another really great example of if you're gonna private label, this is the right way to do it. Curate something amazing for me. I bought it with my own money for a review, and retail value, it is $35.95. Here is the Beauty Bay Book of Magic palette. The full price of the Beauty Bay Book of Magic palette at the time of discontinuation was $30 US. I went back to my Beauty Bay because I was like, there's no way. I'm making that up. You know how much I paid for this? $8 US. I don't know how. I guess it was like on the last leg of its run. I thought it was a fever dream. I went back. I checked my Beauty Bay account. I did in fact pay $8 US for this, which is like crazy bananas to me because now people are selling these for hundreds of bucks because it was discontinued. I believe that my SD card had the audacity to fill up right before our last brand, Nomad Cosmetics. I needed more space than, you know, deleting a few photos that were on here because look at all the Nomad palettes I have. So this is the biggest of my Nomad palettes. This is the Paradise Islands palette. Very fun, very bright, very colorful. This one retails for $44 US. So this one is actually the most expensive of the Nomad palettes. And if I were to guess, it's because this probably has more product than the others. The shimmers in here are great. The mattes in here are great. There are some like shifty, satiny shades, which are really beautiful. I'm actually considering wearing this to my wedding just for that top row because my color is a pop of coral, so I'd do like a nude lip. And then like a coral eye, but we shall see. I purchased this myself either at full price or I used probably Steven's code for a couple dollars off. This is the Tokyo Harajuku palette. This is the first Nomad palette I ever purchased. The first look on my makeup Instagram ever is made with this palette. This retails for $39 US. I paid full price. This is the Fêtes de Provence palette. I'm so sorry about my French. This was actually a gift from my friend Glamsmitty on Instagram/YouTube. She is the greatest. She knows lusting after this. I had actually duped it out and she bought it and sent it to me, which was so, so sweet. This also retails for $39 US. This is the Fire and Ice palette, the Iceland palette. I feel like this, for a while at least, was the most hyped up Nomad palette. It's a very beautiful color story. I love the color story. The formula is nice, but the shimmers in here are definitely, in my personal opinion, not their best shimmers because they're not super sparkly and impactful. That's not like, I look for shimmers like that, but I'll generally use the shimmers in here and then top something like the Fenty Diamond Bomb on top and give it an extra twinkle, and that's perfectly fine for me. Full price, $39 US. This is my very last palette that we're going to talk about. This is the Nomad Hudson Valley palette. This is the newest Nomad palette I have, I believe, but I was actually sent this in PR. This is the only palette that I ever got in PR from Nomad Cosmetics. I love this palette. First and foremost, it just has like such great sentimentality to me because I was sent this palette in PR. It like meant so much to me. But this is just such a beautiful palette. If I was not sent this, I was gonna buy this. I was obsessed with this. This is like the perfect fall color story. But in addition to that, like I use this all the time. Like these three shades here are just like the perfect everyday matte look for me. I love the greens. The red in here is so amazing. Like I think I wore these three shades not just to my engagement party, but potentially the night I got engaged. I wore like these three and then like the Fenty Diamond Bomb on my lid and I was done. It only has 3 shimmers and that is perfectly fine with me. In my opinion, Nomad's best formula in all of their palettes is their mattes. In my whole collection, I have 61 eyeshadow palettes. That is a lot of eyeshadow palettes, Yelly, with more on the way. I'm sure you heard me talk about the Shifty Shadow palette coming on the way. I did just get 2 Viseart palettes, but I'm using them as singles, so they don't count. I already took them out of the palettes. I cheated. I have other palettes that are palettes that I use as singles, so in theory, it is more than 61. Obviously, I've bought more than 61 in my lifetime. Again, I had a pretty recent purge. Now, are we ready for the full retail cost of just my eyeshadow palettes? The full retail cost of my eyeshadow palettes is $3,074.73. That is crazy. Which like it's crazy because in my head I try to rationalize like, oh, but the Natasha Denona palettes, the Pat McGrath palettes, but even without those, it's still what, $2,000? Anyway, I have probably rambled on enough, so I am going to wrap this up. I thank you all for joining me today, especially if you made it to the end of this. Like, this is so long before I edit it. I'm sure it's still going to be pretty long. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up. Let me know below. Let me know on Instagram if you are interested in me doing any more videos. This is definitely something that I want to do with the rest of my collection. I want to be able to see how much my singles are, my lip glosses are, my foundations, etc. Let me know if that's something that you have an interest in, and I hope you all have a great day or night wherever you are. Be healthy, stay safe, and I will see you all on Instagram. Bye!